The day started like any other in our household, chaotic, noisy, and a bit rushed. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over the breakfast table where Lily and Noah were bickering over the last slice of toast. I was sipping my coffee, half listening to their banter while mentally preparing for the day ahead. Olivia was already on her second cup, scrolling through her phone with a distracted expression, as if the rest of us weren't even there. "Mom, can you drop me off at school today?" Lily asked, her voice tinged with that mix of hope and uncertainty that only a 10-year-old can muster. She was at that age where she still needed her mother, but was starting to seek her independence. Olivia barely looked up from her phone. "Not today, sweetie. I have an early meeting with a client. Daddy will take you." Lily's face fell, but she quickly masked her disappointment with a forced smile. "Okay," she mumbled, turning her attention back to her breakfast. I watched the exchange silently, feeling a pang of something I couldn't quite name: sadness, maybe, or frustration. It wasn't the first time Olivia had been too preoccupied with work to spend time with the kids, but lately it felt like it was becoming the norm. There was a time when she would have rearranged her entire schedule just to drop Lily off at school, but those days seemed like a distant memory now. After the kids had finished their breakfast and scattered to gather their things for school, I leaned against the kitchen counter, watching Olivia as she stood by the sink, absent-mindedly rinsing her coffee cup. "Busy day ahead?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. She nodded, still not meeting my gaze. "Yeah, the Jackson wedding is next week, and the client is freaking out over the details. I'll probably be late again tonight." Late again. It was something I was hearing far too often these days. I wasn't sure when it started, but Olivia's work seemed to be taking more and more of her time, leaving less of it for us. There was a time when we were a team, balancing our careers and parenting duties together. Now, it felt like we were living parallel lives close enough to touch, but miles apart in every way that mattered. "I can handle dinner with the kids," I said, hoping for a response that would acknowledge the widening gap between us. "Maybe we can watch a movie when you get home." She finally looked at me, her blue eyes clouded with a mixture of emotions that I couldn't quite decipher. "Maybe," she said softly, but there was no conviction in her voice. It was as if she was agreeing just to end the conversation, not because she actually wanted to spend time with me. I nodded, not pressing the issue further. "I'll get the kids ready," I said, leaving the kitchen to round up Lily and Noah. As I drove the kids to school, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just Olivia's workload; she'd always been busy. But this was different. She was distant, more than usual. She used to share every little detail of her day with me, but now our conversations felt like we were just going through the motions, saying what needed to be said without really connecting. "Dad, are you going to come to my school play next week?" Noah's voice piped up from the back seat, jolting me out of my thoughts. "Of course, buddy," I replied, glancing at him through the rearview mirror. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." "Mom, too?" he asked, his tone hopeful. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "I'll remind her, but you know how busy she is with work. I'm sure she'll try to make it." Noah nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer, but I couldn't ignore the look of uncertainty on his face. It was the same look Lily had worn earlier, and it tore at me in a way I hadn't expected. They were both growing up so fast, and I couldn't help but feel like we were losing something important, something that we used to have, but was slipping away from us. After dropping the kids off, I returned home to my office. Working from home had its perks, and I appreciated the flexibility it gave me to be there for Lily and Noah. But it also meant that I was more attuned to the rhythms of our household, and lately, those rhythms had been unsettling. The house felt emptier even when we were all there, like a shell of what it used to be. As I settled into my work, I couldn't stop my mind from drifting back to Olivia. We had been married for 12 years, and I still loved her deeply, but it was getting harder to ignore the distance between us. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. There was a time when we were each other's confidants, best friends, and partners in every sense of the word. Now, it felt like we were roommates, sharing a space but living separate lives. I tried to shake off the melancholy and focus on my work, but it was no use. The thoughts kept creeping back in, nagging at me like an itch I couldn't scratch. I didn't want to believe that there was something seriously wrong with our marriage, but I couldn't deny that the signs were there, and they had been for a while. The day dragged on, filled with meetings and deadlines, but underneath it all was a constant undercurrent of unease. I couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong, but I knew something wasn't right. The question was, what was I going to do about it? Later that evening, after the kids had gone to bed and the house had settled into its usual nighttime quiet, I found myself standing in the doorway of our bedroom, watching Olivia as she prepared for bed. She moved with a practiced efficiency, brushing her hair, applying her night cream, and slipping into bed without a word. I wanted to say something, anything that might break through the barrier that had grown between us, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I simply climbed into bed beside her, reaching out to take her hand. She didn't pull away, but she didn't hold on either. It was like holding a ghost there, but not really present. We lay there in silence, the only sound the soft hum of the ceiling fan overhead. "I miss you," I finally whispered, more to the darkness than to her. There was a long pause before she responded, her voice barely audible. "I am right here, Ethan." But she wasn't T, not really, and I had a feeling that if I didn't figure out what was going on soon, I might lose her completely. The problem was I didn't know where to start. All I knew was that something had to change before it was too late. As I drifted off to sleep, I made a silent vow to myself I was going to get to the bottom of whatever was going on. For the sake of our marriage, our family, and my own sanity, I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Little did I know that the truth was closer than I imagined, and that it would set off a chain of events that would change everything. The following weeks passed in a blur of routine, but the uneasy feeling that had settled in my gut refused to go away. Olivia was still distant, her attention always divided between work and something else that I couldn't quite place. Every time I tried to bring it up, she brushed me off with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was as if there was an invisible wall between us, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't break through. Then, one evening, the kids and I were finishing dinner when Lily spoke up. "Dad, when is Mommy coming home?" she asked, twirling her fork around the last bit of pasta on her plate. "She said she might be late again tonight," I replied, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. "Why do you ask?" Lily shrugged, her eyes darting to the side as if she was unsure whether to say what was on her mind. She said she was going to take me to get new ballet shoes, but she never did. I frowned, setting my fork down. Did she promise that? "Uh-huh." Lily nodded. "She said we'd go after her last trip, but she's been really busy. She's always talking to her special friend." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. I felt my heart skip a beat. "Special friend?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Yeah," Lily said, oblivious to the tension suddenly crackling in the room. "She talks to him a lot. Sometimes she laughs, and I can hear it from my room." I exchanged a quick glance with Noah, who was more interested in his dessert than the conversation. My mind was racing, trying to process what Lily had just said. Olivia didn't have a lot of male friends that she talked to regularly, and certainly not ones she laughed with so often that Lily would notice. "Did she tell you who this friend is?" I asked as casually as I could, though my heart was pounding in my chest. Lily shook her head. "No, but I think his name is Marcus," I heard her say it once. She said something about him being really important. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Marcus, the CEO she'd been working closely with for the past few months. I'd heard her mention him a few times, always in a professional context, always in passing, but now, something about the way Lily said it made my skin crawl. "All right, kiddo," I said, forcing a smile. "Why don't you go brush your teeth and get ready for bed? I'll come tuck you in soon." Lily nodded and slid off her chair, heading toward the stairs with Noah close behind. As soon as they were out of earshot, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My mind was spinning with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Could it really be what I was starting to fear? Was Olivia cheating on me? I shook my head, trying to dispel the thought. Olivia wouldn't do that. We'd been through so much together, 12 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, countless ups and downs. We were a team, a partnership. She wouldn't throw that away for what? A fling with some rich CEO? The idea seemed absurd, and yet I couldn't shake the growing sense of dread. I tried to push the thoughts away as I went through the motions of putting the kids to bed, but they kept creeping back in, gnawing at me like a relentless itch. By the time I tucked in Noah and read Lily her bedtime story, I was wound tighter than a spring. Olivia still hadn't come home by the time I made it back downstairs. I paced around the living room, glancing at the clock every few minutes. 9:30, 10, 10:30. It was almost 11 by the time I heard the garage door open. I stood in the hallway, my arms crossed, as Olivia walked through the door. She looked exhausted, her makeup smudged and her hair slightly disheveled. But there was something I hadn't noticed before. A tension in her shoulders, a tightness in her smile. "Hey," she said, dropping her purse on the bench by the door. "Sorry I'm so late." The meeting ran over, and then I had to go over some last-minute details with Marcus. The mention of his name sent a jolt through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. "How was it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Olivia sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Stressful. We are cutting it close with the Jackson wedding, and Marcus is putting a lot of pressure on me to make sure everything is perfect. It's just a lot." I nodded, watching her closely. "Lily mentioned that you and Marcus talk a lot," I said, testing the waters. "She called him your special friend." Olivia froze for just a fraction of a second, so brief that I almost missed it. But I didn't. She quickly recovered, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to my ears. "Kids say the strangest things, don't they?" she said, brushing past me toward the kitchen. "Marcus is just a client, Ethan. A very demanding client, but nothing more." The words were meant to reassure me, but they had the opposite effect. They felt rehearsed, like something she said to herself a dozen times before saying it to me. I followed her into the kitchen where she was pouring herself a glass of water. "Olivia," I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Is there something you're not telling me?" She paused, her hand hovering over the glass. For a moment, I thought she might actually tell me the truth, whatever that was. But then she shook her head, giving me that same tight-lipped smile. "Ethan, you're overthinking this," she said softly. "I'm just tired. Can we not do this tonight?" I wanted to press her, to demand answers, but something in her voice stopped me. It was weary, almost pleading. I didn't want to start a fight, especially not when I wasn't even sure what I was fighting about. So I nodded, letting the matter drop. "Okay," I said, though it didn't feel okay. "Let's just get some sleep." Olivia smiled in relief, crossing the kitchen to give me a quick kiss on the cheek before heading upstairs. I stayed behind for a few moments, staring at the glass of water she left half-finished on the counter. My mind was still racing, but I knew pushing her tonight wouldn't get me anywhere. If there was something going on, I needed more than just a hunch. The next morning, I woke up to find Olivia already gone. She left a note on the kitchen counter, saying she had an early meeting and would be back late again. I stared at the note for a long time, feeling that same sense of unease creeping back in. I couldn't just sit around and let this gnaw at me. I needed to know the truth. The question was, how? An idea started to form in the back of my mind, one that I wasn't entirely comfortable with. But desperation has a way of making you do things you never thought you would. Olivia's work laptop was in her office, and I knew she often left it unlocked, especially when she was rushing out the door. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob to her office. This was a line I never crossed before snooping through her things, invading her privacy. But if there was something going on, didn't I have the right to know? The thought of what I might find made my stomach churn, but I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Her laptop was sitting on the desk, the screen dark. I pressed a key, and it sprang to life, revealing the login screen. My heart was pounding in my chest as I typed in the password. She once told me she used the same one for everything, so it didn't take long for me to guess it. The screen unlocked, revealing her cluttered desktop. I swallowed hard, my eyes scanning the icons for anything that would give me answers. I clicked on her email, feeling like a thief in my own home. There were hundreds of messages, work-related mostly. But as I scrolled through them, one thread caught my eye. It was from Marcus, the CEO. The subject line was innocuous enough details for next week, but something about it made my heart race. I clicked on it, and my blood ran cold. The emails were professional at first, discussing plans for the upcoming event, logistics, and schedules. But then, as I scrolled further down, the tone changed. The language became more familiar, more intimate. There were jokes, compliments, inside references that I didn't understand. And then, buried in the middle of the thread, was a single message that shattered my world. Looking forward to seeing you again. Last night was amazing. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the words, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. Amazing? What the hell did that mean? My hands were shaking as I clicked on the next email, my eyes scanning the text for more clues. Missed you this morning. Can't wait for our next meeting. I felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. The words were like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. There was no way to misinterpret this. Olivia and Marcus were more than just colleagues. They were involved. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to smash the laptop against the wall, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by the realization that the woman I loved, the mother of my children, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. After what felt like an eternity, I finally tore my eyes away from the screen. My mind was a storm of emotions, anger, hurt, confusion. How long had this been going on? Was it just a fling or something more? And why? Why would she do this to us, to our family? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing for certain: I needed to confront Olivia. But not now. Not while I was this raw, this broken. I needed to get my thoughts together, to figure out what I was going to say. For now, I shut the laptop and left the office, feeling like I was walking through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I had found what I was looking for, but it didn't bring any relief, only pain. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The only question was, what was I going to do next? The morning after discovering the emails, I woke up with a weight in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I had barely slept, my mind replaying the words ID read over and over again, trying to make sense of them, trying to find a way to deny what was so painfully clear. But no matter how much I wanted to, there was no denying it. Olivia had betrayed me. I spent most of the day in a fog, going through the motions of my work while my thoughts churned endlessly. I tried to focus on the tasks in front of me, but it was no use. Every email, every phone call, every break in the monotony of work was a reminder of what was waiting for me at home. The confrontation I knew I couldn't avoid. As the day wore on, I could feel the tension building inside me, coiling tighter and tighter until I was sure I would snap. By the time Olivia finally walked through the door that evening, I was a tightly wound spring ready to explode. She looked surprised to see me standing in the hallway, my arms crossed, my expression grim. "Ethan," she said, pausing as she closed the door behind her. "You are home early." "I've been here all day," I replied, my voice flat. I couldn't keep the edge out of it no matter how hard I tried. I was angrier than I'd ever been in my life, and it took everything I had not to let it spill out all at once. Olivia seemed to sense that something was wrong. She hesitated, glancing toward the kitchen as if she was about to make some excuse to get away. But there was no escaping this. Not now. "We need to talk," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read: fear, maybe, or guilt. But she nodded, setting her purse down on the bench by the door. "All right," she said quietly. "Let us talk." I led the way into the living room, where ID spent the day thinking about how to approach this conversation. I had rehearsed the words in my head, but now that the moment was here, they seemed to slip away, leaving me with nothing but raw, unfiltered emotion. Olivia sat on the edge of the couch, her posture tense, her hands clasped in her lap. I stood a few feet away, unable to sit, unable to find any comfort in the familiar surroundings of our home. "I found your emails," I said, cutting straight to the heart of it. There was no point in dancing around the issue, not when the truth was already out there. Her eyes widened in shock, her hands tightening around each other until her knuckles turned white. "What emails?" she asked, but the tremor in her voice gave her away. "Don't lie to me, Olivia," I snapped, the anger bubbling to the surface. "I saw them. The ones between you and Marcus. I know what has been going on." She looked down at her lap, her face pale. "Ethan, how long?" I demanded, cutting her off. "I needed to know. I needed to understand how deep this betrayal went. How long have you been seeing him?" Olivia swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "A few months." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. "A few months?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You've been lying to me for months, Olivia. How could you do this?" She flinched at the anger in my voice, but I didn't care. I wanted her to feel it, to understand just how much she'd hurt me. "I never meant for it to happen," she said, her voice trembling. It just happened. I was stressed and Marcus was there and what? He swept you off your feet?" I asked bitterly. "Was it that easy? Was I that easy to forget?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I refused to let them sway me. I had spent the entire day thinking about what I would say, about how I would confront her, and I wasn't about to back down now. "I didn't forget you, Ethan," she said, her voice cracking. "I love you. I love our family. But I don't know what happened. I was stressed and Marcus, he made me feel wanted." The words stung more than I thought they would. "Wanted?" I echoed, my voice hollow. "I wanted you, Olivia. I've always wanted you." "But that wasn't enough, was it?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It wasn't like that," she insisted. "I never meant to hurt you. I was just so overwhelmed with work. And Marcus was there and it just happened. I wanted to believe her, but the anger and hurt were too strong, drowning out any sense of rationality." "So you turned to him instead of talking to me?" I asked, my voice rising again. "You lied to me, to our kids, so you could sneak around with him? Is that what our marriage means to you?" "Ethan, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I never wanted this to happen. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake." "A mistake?" I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and cold. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. This was a choice, Olivia. You chose to betray me, to betray our family. You chose to be with him." She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I watched her, my heart torn between the anger that still raged inside me and the deep, aching sadness that had settled in its place. "How could you do this to us?" I asked, my voice raw. "How could you look me in the eye every day and lie to me? How could you let our children believe that everything was okay when you were sneaking around behind my back?" "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice muffled by her hands. "I am so sorry. I never wanted this to happen." The apology did nothing to ease the pain. It was like a bandage over a wound that was far too deep to be healed with just words. "Sorry doesn't fix this, Olivia," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "Sorry doesn't make this go away." "I know," she said, looking up at me with tear-filled eyes. "I know it doesn't, T. But I love you, Ethan. I love our family. I don't want to lose you." Her words hung in the air, heavy with desperation. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this was just a terrible mistake, something we could somehow work through. But the hurt was too fresh, too raw. "You should have thought about that before you started this," I said, my voice hardening again. "You should have thought about what it would do to us." "I know," she repeated, her voice barely audible. "I know I made a terrible mistake, but please, Ethan, we can work through this. We can go to therapy. We can fix this." I stared at her, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Could we fix this? Could we somehow rebuild the trust that had been shattered? Or was this the end of the life we had built together? "I don't know if I can do that," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Olivia's face crumpled at my words, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please, Ethan," she pleaded, reaching out to me. "Please don't say that. I love you. I'll do anything to make this right." I took a step back, out of her reach. I couldn't have let her touch me, not now, not when I was still so raw. "I need time," I said, my voice rough. "I need to think." She nodded, her hands dropping to her sides as she looked down at the floor. "I understand," she whispered. "Take as much time as you need." I stood there for a moment longer, the weight of everything pressing down on me until it was hard to breathe. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving Olivia standing alone in the living room, her sobs echoing in my ears. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away, to clear my head, to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do now. The night air was cool against my skin as I stepped outside, my footsteps echoing on the pavement as I walked aimlessly down the street. My mind was a mess, a jumble of anger, hurt, and confusion. I had loved Olivia for so long, built a life with her, and now it felt like that life was crumbling around me. I didn't know how to fix it, or if I even wanted to. Eventually, I found myself standing in front of Jason's house, my best friend S' place. I hadn't planned on coming here, but it was the only place that made sense. I needed to talk to someone who knew me, someone who could help me make sense of this mess. I hesitated for a moment, then walked up to the door and knocked. It was late, and I wasn't sure if he would be awake, but after a few moments the door swung open, and Jason stood there, his expression concerned. "Ethan?" he said, taking in my disheveled appearance. "What's going on? Are you okay?" "No," I said, my voice shaking. "I am not." Jason stepped aside, motioning for me to come in. I walked past him, feeling the weight of everything finally catch up to me. As soon as the door closed behind me, I broke down, the tears I had been holding back finally spilling over. Jason didn't say anything. He just put a hand on my shoulder, guiding me to the couch where I collapsed, burying my face in my hands. For a long time, I just sat there, sobbing uncontrollably, the pain of everything I'd been holding in finally finding its release. When I finally managed to pull myself together, Jason handed me a glass of water and sat down beside me, his expression serious. "What happened?" he asked gently. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Olivia, she's been cheating on me." The words felt foreign in my mouth, as if saying them out loud made them real in a way that they hadn't been before. Jason's eyes widened in shock, and he shook his head as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. I nodded, my hands trembling as I held the glass of water. I found emails. Between her and Marcus, the guy she's been working with, they were involved. Jason swore under his breath, running a hand through his hair. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "Neither did I said, my voice hollow. "I never saw it coming. I thought we were happy. I thought we were okay." Jason shook his head, his expression one of deep sympathy. "I don't know what to say, man. This is messed up." I nodded, feeling a fresh wave of pain wash over me. "I don't know what to do, Jason. She says sorry, that she wants to fix things. But how am I supposed to trust her again? How am I supposed to just move past this?" Jason sighed, leaning back on the couch. "I don't have the answers, Ethan. But you don't have to figure it all out tonight. Take your time. Don't make any decisions until you've had a chance to think things through." I nodded, knowing he was right, but feeling no less lost. "I don't even know if I can go back there," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can even look at her." Jason was silent for a moment, then he placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're welcome to crash here tonight if you need to," he said. "Take as long as you need." I looked at him, feeling a rush of gratitude for the offer. "Thanks, Jason," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I think I'll take you up on that." He nodded, giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze before standing up. "I'll grab you some blankets and a pillow. Just try to get some rest, okay?" I nodded, watching as he disappeared down the hallway to get the bedding. I leaned back on the couch, staring up at the ceiling as the events of the night replayed in my mind. I had come here looking for answers, but all I had were more questions that only time and maybe some distance could answer. As I lay there in the dark, the quiet of Jason S. house surrounding me, I couldn't help but wonder what was left of the life I had known. Olivia had shattered my trust, and I didn't know if I could ever put the pieces back together. All I knew was that the road ahead was uncertain, and for the first time in my life, I had no idea where it would lead. I woke up on Jason S. couch, disoriented and stiff. The blanket was tangled around my legs, and the pillow had slipped to the floor at some point during the night. The events of the previous evening crashed back into my consciousness like a tidal wave, and I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, a suffocating blend of anger and sadness. Jason was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. He looked up as I walked in, his expression concerned. "Morning," he said, his voice low. "Morning," I replied, my voice rough from a night of restless sleep. I hesitated in the doorway, not sure if I was ready to face the day yet. The weight of everything that had happened hung over me like a storm cloud, and I knew it wasn't going to just disappear. "Coffee's fresh," Jason offered, nodding toward the pot on the counter. "You want some?" I nodded, grateful for the small kindness. "Yeah, thanks." I poured myself a cup, the rich aroma filling the air as I added a splash of cream. The simple act of making coffee felt almost surreal, like I was going through the motions of a life that no longer fit. I took a seat across from Jason, staring into my cup as the steam rose in delicate tendrils. We sat in silence for a few moments, the quiet only broken by the occasional clink of Jason S. spoon against his mug. "How are you holding up?" Jason finally asked, his tone gentle. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know," I admitted. "It's like everything I thought I knew just got turned upside down. I am angry, I am hurt, I am lost." Jason nodded, his expression sympathetic. "I get it. What Olivia did, it's not something you just get over. It's going to take time." "I don't even know where to start," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I feel like I'm drowning in this betrayal, and I don't know how to come up for air." Jason leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "You don't have to figure it all out right now, Ethan. Take it one day at a time, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it." I nodded, knowing he was right but feeling no less overwhelmed. "I keep asking myself how this happened," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "How did we get here? How did I not see it?" Jason was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed. "People are good at hiding things when they want to," he said. "And when you are in love, you trust. You don't expect the person you love to betray you like that." The truth in his words hit me hard. I had trusted Olivia, believed in her, and she had taken that trust and shattered it. And now I was left to pick up the pieces. "What do I do now, Jason?" I asked, looking up at him with a mixture of desperation and uncertainty. "How do I move forward?" Jason took a deep breath, considering his words carefully. "I think you need to figure out what you want, Ethan. Do you want to try to work things out with Olivia? Or do you think it's time to walk away?" The question hung in the air, heavy and loaded. I hadn't allowed myself to really think about it until now, but the reality was unavoidable. I had to make a choice, and neither option felt right. "I don't know if I can forgive her," I admitted, my voice cracking. "But at the same time, we have kids, a life together. How do I just throw that away?" Jason S. eyes softened, and he reached across the table to give my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "No one is saying you have to make that decision today," he said. "Take the time you need to sort through your feelings. And remember, whatever you decide, you don't have to go through this alone." I nodded, blinking back the tears that threatened to spill over. I hated feeling this vulnerable, but Jason's steady presence was a lifeline in the chaos that had become my life. "Thanks," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Jason smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "You'd do the same for me, man." We sat in silence for a while, sipping our coffee as the weight of the situation settled over us. I knew I had a long road ahead of me, and the thought of it was exhausting. But at least I wasn't facing it alone. Later that day, I decided to go back home. I couldn't avoid it forever. And besides, the kids would be home soon. They needed some sense of normalcy, even if everything else was falling apart. I wasn't sure what I would say to Olivia, if I would say anything at all, but I knew I couldn't hide out at Jason S. indefinitely. When I walked through the front door, the house was eerily quiet. Olivia was sitting on the couch, her eyes red and puffy as if she'd spent the night crying. She looked up when I entered, her expression a mix of hope and dread. "Ethan," she said softly, standing up as if she wasn't sure whether to approach me or keep her distance. I held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. "I don't want to talk about it right now," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "The kids will be home soon. We need to keep it together for them." She nodded, swallowing hard. "Of course. I understand." There was a tension in the air, thick and suffocating, as we went through the motions of preparing for the kids' return. I kept my distance, not ready to face the full brunt of what had happened, and Olivia seemed to sense that. She moved around the house quietly, almost like a ghost, her presence more a shadow than a person. When Lily and Noah burst through the door that afternoon, chattering excitedly about their day at school, it took every ounce of strength I had to put on a smile. They were so full of life, so innocent and unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. I couldn't bear to shatter that for them, not yet. We ate dinner together as a family, the four of us sitting around the table like we always did. But the atmosphere was different, heavy with unspoken words and lingering hurt. Olivia tried to engage the kids in conversation, asking about their day, their friends, their school projects, but there was a stiffness to her voice, a forced cheerfulness that I knew was a mask for the guilt and fear she was feeling. I barely spoke, my mind elsewhere as I pushed my food around on my plate. I couldn't stop thinking about the emails, about the lies, about the betrayal. The anger I had felt the night before was still there, simmering just beneath the surface, but it was mixed with something else now, something darker, something more painful. After dinner, the kids retreated to their rooms to do their homework, leaving Olivia and me alone in the kitchen. The silence was deafening, the tension between us palpable. I could feel her eyes on me, watching, waiting, but I couldn't bring myself to look at her. "I'm going to bed," I said finally, standing up and grabbing my plate to take to the sink. "Ethan, wait," Olivia said, her voice pleading. "Please, can we talk? Just for a minute?" I hesitated, the urge to flee warring with the part of me that still wanted answers, that still needed to understand. With a heavy sigh, I set my plate down and turned to face her. "What is there to talk about, Olivia?" I asked, my voice weary. "You lied to me. You betrayed me. What else is there to say?" She flinched at the harshness in my tone, but she didn't back down. "I know I messed up," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I hurt you in the worst way possible. But I love you, Ethan. I love our family, and I am willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. How do you expect me to believe that?" I asked, my voice cracking with emotion. "You've been lying to me for months. How do I know you're not lying now?" "I'm not," she insisted, stepping closer, her eyes filled with desperation. "I swear to you, Ethan, I am not. I'll do anything to prove it to you. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut off all contact with Marcus. I'll do whatever it takes." I stared at her, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to take her at her word and try to salvage what we had. But the hurt was still too fresh, too raw. "Therapy," I said slowly, testing the word on my tongue. "You really think that S going to fix this?" "It's just a start," Olivia said, her voice trembling with hope. "Please, Ethan, just give us a chance. Give me a chance to make it right." I wanted to scream at her, to tell her that she had already had her chance, that she had blown it. But I couldn't find the words. Instead, I just stood there, staring at her as the weight of the situation bore down on me. "I don't know if I can do this," I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." The words hung in the air, heavy and painful, and I could see the devastation in Olivia S.'s eyes. She took a shaky breath, nodding slowly. "I understand," she said, her voice cracking. "But please, Ethan, Dawn to shut me out, Dawn to shut us out." I didn't have an answer for her. I didn't know what to say, what to think, what to feel. I was lost, adrift in a sea of emotions that I couldn't control. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Olivia standing there alone. I made my way upstairs to the bedroom, the room we had shared for so many years, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt cold, empty, like a shell of the life we had once had. I crawled into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin as I stared at the ceiling. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but none of them made any sense. I wanted to scream, to cry, to hit something, but all I could do was lie there, numb and exhausted. Eventually, Olivia joined me in bed, slipping under the covers with a tentative caution that I had never seen from her before. She stayed on her side, not touching me, not speaking, just lying there in the darkness. We were inches apart, but it felt like miles. The chasm between us was vast, and I didn't know how to bridge it or if I even wanted to. As the night wore on, I felt the exhaustion of the day finally catch up to me, pulling me into a fitful sleep. My dreams were filled with images of betrayal, of anger, of loss, and I woke up several times, my heart pounding in my chest. Each time I woke up, I could feel Olivia's presence beside me, her breathing slow and even as she slept. I wondered how she could sleep so peacefully when everything was falling apart. But then again, maybe she was just as exhausted as I was exhausted from the lies, the secrets, the guilt. Morning came all too soon, the first rays of sunlight filtering through the curtains and casting a soft glow over the room. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, dreading the day ahead. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I needed answers. I needed clarity. And most of all, I needed to figure out if there was anything left worth saving. But for now, I just needed to get through the day. One step at a time, one breath at a time, and maybe, just maybe, I'd find a way to come up for air. The days that followed were a blur of emotions and confusion. I found myself going through the motions of life, but everything felt detached, as if I were watching someone else live my life from a distance. The anger and betrayal that had consumed me were still there, but now they were mixed with a deep sadness, a mourning for the life I thought we had, for the future that now seemed so uncertain. Olivia and I barely spoke. The tension in the house was thick and oppressive, hanging over us like a storm cloud that refused to dissipate. The kids sensed it too. Lily was quieter than usual, her usual chatter reduced to short, careful sentences. Noah seemed oblivious at first, but even he began to pick up on the strain. I could see it in the way he looked at me, his eyes searching mine as if he was trying to understand something beyond his grasp. It was Sarah, my sister, who finally pulled me out of my haze. She called one afternoon, her voice warm and comforting, the way it always was when I was a kid and needed her to chase away my fears. "Ethan, you need to talk to someone about this," she said, not bothering to sugarcoat her concern. "You can just let it fester." "I'm trying, Sarah," I replied, leaning against the kitchen counter, staring out the window at the backyard where the kids were playing. It's too much. I don't even know where to start." "You don't have to do it alone," she said firmly. "You need to talk to a therapist, someone who can help you sort through everything." I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. Olivia mentioned therapy. I don't know if I'm ready to sit in a room and talk about all of this." "You don't have to be ready," Sarah said gently. "You just have to start. You've been carrying this alone and it's tearing you apart. Therapy isn't about having all the answers, it is about finding a way to deal with the questions." I was silent for a moment, letting her words sink in. "Do you really think it could help?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I do," she said softly. "And if there's any chance of saving your marriage or even just finding peace for yourself, you owe it to yourself to try." I knew she was right. As much as I wanted to believe I could handle this on my own, the truth was that I was drowning. I needed help, someone to guide me through the mess that my life had become. "Okay," I said finally, my voice heavy with resignation. "I'll talk to Olivia. We'll try therapy." Sarah's relief was palpable even through the phone. "I'm glad to hear that, Ethan. You are doing the right thing. Thanks, Sarah." I said, meaning it. For everything. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring out at the kids as they played. I knew I needed to talk to Olivia, to let her know that I was willing to give therapy a try. But the thought of confronting her again, of opening myself up to more pain, was almost too much to bear. Still, I couldn't avoid it forever. I needed to make a decision for myself, for the kids, and even for Olivia. We couldn't keep living like this, in a limbo of unresolved emotions and unspoken words. That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I found Olivia sitting on the back porch, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea as she stared out into the darkening sky. She didn't look up when I joined her, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself as if she were bracing for a blow. "Olivia," I said softly, taking a seat beside her, "we need to talk." She nodded, still not looking at me. "I know." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I talked to Sarah today," I began, keeping my tone calm and even. "She thinks I should give therapy a try, and I think she's right." Olivia's head snapped up, her eyes wide with surprise. "You do?" I nodded, my gaze steady. "I do. But I want to be clear, I am doing this because I need to figure out what I want, what is best for me and for the kids. I don't know if this will fix anything between us, but I think it's worth trying." She swallowed hard, her hands trembling slightly as she set the mug down on the table beside her. "I understand," she said quietly, "and I am willing to do whatever it takes, Ethan. I know I have hurt you, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if that's what it takes." Her words were sincere, but they didn't erase the pain that lingered between us. I knew that no matter how much she apologized, no matter how much she promised to change, the scars of her betrayal would always be there. The question was whether I could live with those scars or if they would eventually consume me. "We'll see," I said, my voice firm. "Let us start with therapy and take it one step at a time. But I want you to know I am not making any promises. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Olivia. I don't know if I want to." Her face crumpled at my words, tears spilling down her cheeks as she reached out to me. But I pulled back, not ready to let her in, not yet. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I am so sorry, Ethan. I know I can take back what I did, but I'll do anything to make it right." I stared at her, my heart heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. "I just need time," I said finally. "Time to figure out what I want, what is best for the kids. That is all I can promise right now." She nodded, wiping away her tears with the back of her hand. "I understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Take all the time you need." We sat in silence for a while after that. The only sound, the distant chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves in the night breeze. It was a fragile peace, a moment of calm in the storm that had become our lives. But it was enough for now. The following week, we started therapy with Dr. Collins, a well-respected marriage and family therapist that Sarah had recommended. The first session was awkward, filled with tension and unspoken resentment. Dr. Collins was kind but firm, guiding us through the process with a steady hand. "It's important that both of you feel safe here," she said at the start of the session, her tone calm and reassuring. "This is a space for honesty, but also for respect. We are going to talk about difficult things, and that's okay. But we are going to do it in a way that's productive, that helps us move forward." Olivia nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I could see the fear in her eyes, the uncertainty. She wanted this to work. I could tell, but I wasn't sure if I had the same desire. I was there because I needed answers, not because I believed in a miracle cure for our shattered marriage. Dr. Collins began by asking us to talk about what had brought us to therapy, why we were there. Olivia spoke first, her voice trembling as she recounted the events that had led to her affair, the stress, the loneliness, the way she had let herself be drawn into something that she knew was wrong. "I know it sounds like an excuse," she said, her voice thick with tears. "But I wasn't thinking clearly. I was overwhelmed, and Marcus, he was there, offering comfort. I didn't intend for it to happen, but it did, and I've regretted it every day since." I listened, my emotions a tangled mess of anger and sorrow. Her words didn't absolve her of what she'd done, but they did offer some insight into how she had ended up where she did. It didn't make it right, but it made it understandable in a way. When it was my turn to speak, I struggled to find the right words. I didn't want to come across as bitter or vindictive, but the hurt was still so raw, so fresh. I trusted her, I said finally, my voice shaking. I believed in her, in us, and she destroyed that trust. I don't know how to come back from that. I don't know if I want to. Dr. Collins nodded, her expression sympathetic. Trust is a fundamental part of any relationship, she said. When it is broken, it can feel impossible to rebuild. But that's what we are here to explore, to see if there is a path forward, and if there is, what that path looks like. The session continued, with Dr. Collins guiding us through exercises designed to open up communication, to address the underlying issues that had led us to this point. It was painful, exhausting work, but there were moments of clarity, moments where I felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a way through this. But then there were other moments where the anger and betrayal surged back to the surface, threatening to overwhelm any progress we had made. It was a constant push and pull, a battle between the part of me that wanted to try and the part of me that wanted to walk away. After several weeks of therapy, I was no closer to a decision. There were days when I thought maybe we could make it work, that the love we had shared for so long was worth fighting for. But then there were other days when the pain was too much, when I couldn't even look at Olivia without seeing the betrayal in her eyes. It was during one of those dark days that I received an unexpected visit from Rachel, Olivia's assistant. She showed up at our door, looking anxious and uncomfortable, her usual polished demeanor replaced by a nervous energy that made me wary. "Ethan, can I talk to you?" she asked, her voice hesitant. I frowned, stepping aside to let her in. "Sure, what is going on?" She wrung her hands, clearly struggling with whatever it was she had come to say. I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago." My heart sank, dread coiling in my stomach. "What is it, Rachel?" She took a deep breath, her eyes filled with guilt. "I knew about the affair," she said quietly. "I knew, and I didn't say anything. I thought I was protecting Olivia, but I see now that I was just enabling her." Her confession hit me like a ton of bricks. I had always liked Rachel. She was professional, competent, loyal. But now, knowing that she had been complicit in Olivia's betrayal, I felt a surge of anger that I struggled to control. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice cold. "Because you deserve to know the truth," Rachel said, her voice filled with regret. "I made a mistake, Ethan. I thought I was doing the right thing by keeping quiet, but I see now that I was wrong. I'm so sorry." I stared at her, my mind reeling. "What do you expect me to do with this information, Rachel? It doesn't change anything. It doesn't make it better." "I know," she said, tears welling in her eyes. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. You deserve to know everything, not just the parts Olivia told you." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Thank you for telling me," I said finally, though the words felt hollow. Rachel nodded, wiping away her tears. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I wish I had done things differently." When she left, I stood in the entryway for a long time, my mind racing with the implications of what she had said. Rachel's confession didn't change the fact that Olivia had betrayed me, but it did add another layer of complexity to the situation. How many other people had known? How many had turned a blind eye? The thought made me sick, but it also clarified something for me. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, torn between staying and leaving. I needed to make a decision for my own sanity, for the kids, and even for Olivia. That night, after the kids were in bed, I found Olivia in the living room, her eyes red from crying. She looked up as I entered, her expression filled with fear and resignation. "Ethan?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. She nodded, sitting up straighter on the couch as if bracing herself for what was to come. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything that has happened, and I've come to a decision. Olivia's eyes widened, and I could see the fear in them, the desperation. "What is it?" "I'm filing for divorce," I said, the words coming out stronger than I had expected. I can't do this anymore, Olivia. I can't keep living in the shadow of what you did, wondering if I'll ever be able to trust you again. It's not fair to me, and it's not fair to the kids. Her face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Ethan, please, I know I've hurt you, but we can still fix this. We can still… No, I said firmly, cutting her off. I've tried, Olivia. I've tried to see a way forward, but the trust is gone, and without trust, there's nothing left. She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I am sorry, she whispered. I am so sorry. I know you are, I said, my voice softening, and I believe that you are. But sorry isn't enough to fix this. I need to move on, and so do you. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. What about the kids? How do we tell them? We'll tell them together, I said, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. And we'll make sure they know that we both love them, and that this isn't their fault. They need to understand that. Olivia nodded, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Okay, she whispered. Okay. I watched her for a moment, my heart heavy with the finality of it all. This was the end of our marriage, the end of the life we had built together. But it was also the beginning of something new, something that, while painful, was necessary. I turned to leave, but then paused, glancing back at Olivia. We'll get through this, Olivia. For the kids. We'll make sure they're okay. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. I didn't respond, just nodded before walking out of the room, leaving her alone with her grief. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The decision had been made, and now I could finally start to move forward. It wouldn't be easy, nothing about this was easy, but it was the right thing to do. For myself, for the kids, and even for Olivia. We all deserved a chance to heal, to find a new path, even if it wasn't the one we had originally planned. And so, as I lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, I felt a glimmer of hope. It was faint, barely there, but it was enough to remind me that life would go on, that I would go on, and that, in time, we would all find a way to come up for air. The days following my decision were some of the most challenging I'd ever faced. Filing for divorce felt like signing away the life I'd known, and even though I knew it was the right choice, it didn't make it any easier. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, now felt like a hollow shell, echoing with the memories of what we used to be. Olivia and I broke the news to the kids together, sitting them down in the living room where so many of our family moments had taken place. I remember the way Lily's eyes had filled with tears before I even began to speak, as if she instinctively knew that something was wrong. Noah, ever the curious and sensitive one, looked between us with wide, questioning eyes, trying to piece together what was happening. Mommy and Daddy need to talk to you about something important, I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. We want you to know that we both love you very much, and that will never change. Olivia, her voice barely holding together, added, but sometimes, even when people love each other, they can't stay together the way they used to. Your dad and I have decided that it is best if we live in separate houses. Lilia's lip trembled, and she glanced at me, her expression one of betrayal and confusion. Are you getting a divorce? She asked, her voice trembling. I nodded slowly, my heart breaking as I watched the realization dawn on her face. Yes, Lily, I said softly. We are getting a divorce, but that doesn't mean we don't love you and Noah. We'll always be your mom and dad, and we'll always be here for you. Noah was silent for a long moment, absorbing the information. Then, with the innocent bluntness of a child, he asked, Why? Why can't we all stay together? It was Olivia who answered, her voice shaking with emotion. Sometimes, people make mistakes, Noah, big mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes make it hard for them to stay together. I watched as Noah's brow furrowed in confusion, his young mind struggling to grasp the complexity of the situation. I knew it was too much for him to fully understand, but I also knew that honesty, though painful, was the best way forward. Even though we wanted to be living together, we were still a family, I added, reaching out to take his hand. And you will still see both of us all the time. That won't change. The conversation ended with both kids in tears, Olivia and I doing our best to comfort them while our own hearts ached. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, and I knew it would take time for them to adjust to this new reality. As the days turned into weeks, the logistics of the separation began to take shape. Olivia and I worked together to make the transition as smooth as possible for the kids, dividing our time with them and ensuring that they felt loved and supported through it all. It wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, of regret, of second-guessing the decision, but we both knew it was necessary. We moved into a routine, an uneasy truce that allowed us to co-parent without tearing each other apart. Therapy sessions continued, though they shifted from marriage counseling to helping us navigate the complexities of divorce and co-parenting. Dr. Collins was a steady presence, guiding us through the process with empathy and understanding. One afternoon, a few months after the divorce papers were filed, I met with Jason for lunch. He'd been a constant source of support throughout the ordeal, always ready with a listening ear or a word of advice. As we sat at our usual spot at the local diner, he looked at me with a mix of concern and curiosity. "How are you holding up?" he asked, taking a sip of his coffee. I shrugged, poking at my food with little appetite. "Some days are better than others," I admitted. "But overall, I think I'm doing okay. The kids are adjusting, which is the most important thing." Jason nodded thoughtfully. "You've been through hell, Ethan, but you're coming out the other side. That is something to be proud of." I smiled faintly, appreciating his words even though I didn't fully feel the truth of them yet. "I'm just trying to take it one day at a time. It's all I can do." He studied me for a moment, then asked, "Have you thought about what's next? I mean, for you, not just with the kids, but with your life?" The question caught me off guard, and I found myself staring out the window, lost in thought. "I don't know," I said after a long pause. "I haven't really thought that far ahead. I've been so focused on getting through the day today that I haven't had time to think about the future." Jason leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful look on his face. Maybe that's okay for now. But at some point, you're going to have to figure out what you want. Whether that's moving somewhere new, focusing on your career, or eventually, maybe even finding someone new." I blinked, the idea of a future beyond this moment feeling both foreign and intimidating. "Someone new?" I echoed, shaking my head. "I can't even think about that right now." Jason held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Hey, I'm not saying it has to be tomorrow, just keep it in mind. You've got a lot of life left to live, Ethan. Don't to close yourself off to the possibility of happiness." His words lingered with me long after our lunch ended, planting a seed of thought that I wasn't quite ready to water. The idea of starting over, of building a new life, was overwhelming, but maybe in time, it wouldn't seem so daunting. The divorce was finalized a few months later. The legalities concluded with a finality that felt both relieving and sorrowful. Olivia and I sat across from each other in the lawyer's office, signing the papers that officially ended our marriage. It was a quiet, somber moment, the culmination of everything we'd been through. When it was done, we walked out of the office together, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. I turned to her, searching for something to say, something that would bring closure to the chapter we were closing. "Olivia," I began, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know we didn't end up where we thought we would, but I don't regret the life we built together. I don't regret our kids or the years we spent as a family." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears, but she managed a small, sad smile. "I don't regret it either, Ethan. I'm sorry for everything that happened, and I hope we can both find happiness in our own ways." I nodded, feeling a sense of finality settle over me. "I wish you the best, Olivia, and I'll always be here for the kids. We'll get through this together, even if we are apart." She wiped away a tear and reached out to give my hand a gentle squeeze. "Thank you, Ethan, for everything." With that, we parted ways, each of us stepping into a future that was still uncertain but filled with the promise of new beginnings. The weeks and months that followed were a time of adjustment, of learning to navigate life as a single parent. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the routine and the sense of accomplishment it provided. But I also made time for the kids, ensuring that they knew they were loved and supported, even as our family structure changed. There were difficult moments, of course, moments when the loneliness crept in, when the weight of everything that had happened threatened to overwhelm me. But there were also moments of peace, of clarity, where I could see a path forward. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lily came out to join me. She was growing up so fast, her once childlike features giving way to the first signs of adolescence. She sat down beside me, her expression thoughtful. "Dad?" she asked, her voice soft. "Yeah, sweetheart," I replied, turning to look at her. "Are you okay?" she asked, her eyes filled with a maturity that took me by surprise. "I mean, with everything that happened?" I smiled, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face. "I am okay, Lily. It has been hard, but we are getting through it. And as long as I have you and Noah, I know I'll be fine." She nodded, her expression serious. "I miss how things used to be, but I think you're right. We're going to be okay." I pulled her into a hug, feeling a rush of love and pride for this incredible young girl who had shown so much strength through it all. "We are," I said softly. "And no matter what happens, we'll always be a family. That is something that will never change." As we sat there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't experienced in a long time. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I knew that with my children by my side, I could face whatever came next. Life had taken a turn I hadn't expected, but it had also given me the opportunity to rebuild, to find a new sense of purpose and happiness. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, I made a silent vow to myself to embrace whatever came next, to live fully and openly, and to find joy in the little moments, even when the big ones seemed overwhelming. Because in the end, life was about more than just the choices we made or the mistakes we regretted. It was about the love we shared, the memories we created, and the hope we held on to, even when the world seemed darkest. And I knew, deep down, that we would be okay. We would find our way forward, one step at a time, and we would come out stronger on the other side. As I held Lily close, I whispered a silent promise to her, to Noah, and to myself. We will get through this. We will be okay. And together we will find our way to happiness once again. Thank you for listening to this story. Subscribe to my channel, put a like under the video, and write a comment about how you like this story and what stories you want to hear.